The morning of May 11, 1945, broke over southern Okinawa like a cracked eggshell, thin, pale light leaking through low cloud and drifting gun smoke. Rain from the night still clung to the kunai grass and dripped from shattered sugarcane leaves. The air tasted of wet coral dust and rotting vegetation. In the American lines, men moved like ghosts, ponchos dark with moisture, helmets bowed against the drizzle. Lieutenant Colonel William Wild Bill Crouch stood on the reverse slope of Conical Hill, coat unbuttoned despite the chill, watching his battalion form up. 42 years old, face carved deep by Guadalcanal Peleliu, and too many nights staring at the underside of a poncho while men died around him. His eyes were the color of wet slate, and they never seemed to blink when bullets were close. Today they carried something new under their dungarees. The Doron plate, 12 layers of fiberglass cloth bonded with resin, shaped like a shallow dinner plate, hung front and back from shoulder straps. 8 pounds. Awkward, hot, experimental. Only enough for one reinforced company in the entire 1st Marine Division. Crouch had fought for those plates the way other men fought for ammunition. He had won. He did not feel like a winner. "Listen up," he said, voice low enough that the men had to lean in. "Those plates are not permission to play hero. They're permission to keep your buddies alive. You still take cover. You still go low. But if you have to cross 30 yards of open ground to get a bar into position, you do it standing up. Understood?" A ripple of nods. Some men looked grateful. Others looked betrayed, as if the Corps had suddenly changed the rules without telling them. Gunnery Sergeant Basselone, thick-necked, scar across the throat from a banzai charge on Gloucester, spat into the mud. "Feels like cheating, sir. It feels like living, Gunny. Move out." Across the valley, in the honeycomb of caves and tombs that the Japanese called the Shuri Line, Corporal Yamada Hiroshi checked the 0 on his Type 99 rifle for the 3rd time. 24 years old. From a mountain village in Nagano, he had killed 12 Americans so far, 12 confirmed, hearts or necks, 1 round each. He believed in the rifle the way monks believe in sutras. The rifle had never lied to him. His platoon leader, Lieutenant Nakamura, passed the word. The Americans were coming again, straight across the open ground south of Conical, the same killing field they had tried 3 times and failed. "Today they die quickly," Nakamura said. "Fire discipline, center mass, no wasted rounds." Yamada nodded. He worked the bolt, seated a fresh 7.7mm cartridge, and waited for the shapes to appear through the mist. They appeared. First as shadows, then as men, walking. Not charging, walking. Spread out, rifles at the ready, but upright, almost casual. No scrambling from rock to rock. No desperate low crawl. Just a steady, deliberate advance across coral-studded earth that every Japanese soldier knew was registered down to the square meter by mortars, Nambus, and a dozen Arisakas rifles. Yamada picked his target, a tall Marine near the center, helmet tipped back, Thompson gun hanging loose at his side. Range 180 meters. Slight crosswind from the east. He exhaled, squeezed. Crack. The bullet struck just left of the sternum. Yamada saw the puff of dust from the dungaree jacket, saw the Marine stagger half a step and then keep walking. Impossible. He worked the bolt, chambered another round, fired again. Same Marine. Same place. The man stumbled, caught his balance, and adjusted the hang of his submachine gun like someone shrugging off a heavy pack. Around Yamada, the trench erupted in fire. 20 rifles, 3 Nambu machine guns, knees braced against coral rock, muzzle flashes stabbing the fog. The air filled with the sharp stink of cordite and the rhythmic thump of bolts cycling. 50 meters closer now, the Marines still walking. Private First Class Robert Leki, 19, from Cleveland, 3rd day in combat, felt the first hit like a fastball to the chest. The plate flexed, spread the shock, drove the air from his lungs in a single whoosh. His knees buckled, but the straps held him upright. A second bullet smacked the same plate a hand's breadth lower. The fiberglass rang like a dropped tray. Leki tasted blood where he'd bitten his tongue, but his heart was still beating. Keep walking, just keep walking. Another round struck high on the plate and glanced upward, screeching off his helmet with a clang that left his ears ringing. Coral dust exploded around his boots. He could hear someone screaming, Japanese voices, high and frantic, but the words made no sense. In the trench, Lieutenant Nakamura was shouting himself hoarse. Again, again, center of mass. Yamada fired his fifth round. The tall Marine with the Thompson was less than 60 meters away now. Close enough that Yamada could see the white scar across the fiberglass plate where his first bullet had struck. The American looked straight at him, raised the Thompson one-handed, and fired a casual burst into the aperture. Rock chips exploded around Yamada's face. He dropped behind the parapet, hands shaking so badly he could barely work the bolt. Everywhere along the line it was the same. Bullets snapped and whined, struck home with solid, meaty thwacks, and the Americans refused to fall. Some staggered, some coughed, doubled over for a second, then straightened and kept coming. One Marine took 3 hits in rapid succession, went to one knee, vomited into the mud, then stood up again and waved his squad forward like a traffic cop. The Japanese fire began to falter, not from lack of ammunition, but from lack of faith. Rifles lowered a fraction. Machine gunners stared at their beaten zones as if the laws of physics had quietly walked away. Gunnery Sergeant Basselone felt the plate take its first solid hit and laughed out loud. A short, incredulous bark. He had expected pain, expected darkness. Instead, he got a bruise and forward motion. He stepped over a shattered Japanese machine gun position and kept walking, boots squelching in someone else's blood. Behind him, Lieutenant Colonel Crouch walked in the open, hands empty, watching his men do what no infantry in history had ever done, absorb aimed rifle fire at 50 meters in advance. The fog seemed to thicken with disbelief. From a cave mouth high on the Shuri escarpment, General Ushijima Mitsuru lowered his binoculars. His operations officer stood beside him, mouth working soundlessly. "They are not falling," the officer whispered. Ushijima said nothing. He only watched the line of upright figures moving through the smoke and felt something cold settle in his stomach that had nothing to do with the morning rain. And on that morning, fear switched sides. The sun climbed, burning off the fog in ragged patches, and the battlefield revealed itself in full, ugly detail. Bodies twisted in the kunai grass, smoke drifting from shattered tombs, the stink of burned powder and ruptured intestines. By 900, the first trench line belonged to the Marines, taken not by flanking or artillery preparation, but by walking straight into it. Word spread faster than runners could carry it. In the 1st Marine Division command dugout, a signals officer burst in waving a scrap of paper. "Sir, 1/5 reports they advanced 400 yards across open ground under rifle and MG fire. Casualties, 6 wounded, 0 KIA. They say the plates took at least 40 confirmed center mass hits." The Division G3 stared at the message as though it were written in Martian. 40 confirmed? Marines counted the scars on the plates, sir. Some men have 3, 4 dents each. The news rippled outward like a shockwave. From battalion to battalion, company to company, men who had never seen a Doron plate suddenly wanted one, the way drowning men want air. Men who had them began to walk differently, shoulders squared, chins up, the old flinch gone from their eyes. Private Robert Leki sat on an ammo crate while a courtman cut away his dungaree shirt. The Doron plate was a mess of white stress fractures and deep pockmarks. One bullet had punched a perfect star-shaped crater dead center over his heart. "Jesus, kid," the corpsman muttered, probing bruised ribs. "You're gonna piss purple for a week, but the ticker's still ticking." Leki stared at the plate in his lap. The fiberglass felt warm from his body. "I thought I was dead," he said quietly. 3 times. "Welcome to tomorrow, Marine." Across the lines, Japanese radio traffic became frantic. Intercepts crackled in the intelligence tents. Enemy infantry not reacting to rifle fire. Request instructions. Center mass hits ineffective. Men are frightened. In a forward observation post carved into a coral ridge, Corporal Yamada Hiroshi cleaned his rifle with mechanical precision while his hands still shook. 5 rounds fired. 5 solid hits. 5 men who should be dead. His spotter, a quiet boy from Hokkaido, kept repeating the same phrase under his breath. "Yurei-da, they are ghosts." Yamada wanted to slap him, but he couldn't find the anger. The rifle felt heavier than it ever had. The bolt moved sluggishly, as if the metal itself doubted its purpose. Lieutenant Colonel Crouch walked captured ground with Dr. Clarence Smith, the battalion surgeon, who carried a clipboard like a priest with a breviary. Smith knelt beside every armored Marine who would let him, tracing the impact craters with clinical fingers. "Bruised sternums, cracked ribs, 1 pulmonary contusion," he recited. No penetrations, not one. Bill, this is biblical. Crouch didn't smile. Count the men who didn't get plates, Doc. They're still crawling through the same grass. Smith's face darkened. He had already treated 4 of them, gut shot, throat shot, because they had bellied down while their armored buddies stood tall. By noon, the second wave went forward. This time, 2 companies had Doron, still less than half the battalion, but enough to change the geometry of fear. Japanese machine gunners opened up at 300 meters, tracers stitching red lines across the valley. The armored Marines rose from cover and walked through the streams of fire like men wading a shallow river. Unarmored Marines rose with them, because to stay behind felt like cowardice now. Gunnery Sergeant Basselone led a platoon straight at a cluster of log bunkers. A Type 92 machine gun hammered at him from 40 yards. He felt the impacts, thump, 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 across his chest plate, each one a mule kick that drove him half a step sideways. He kept walking. Behind him, an unarmored private named Kowalski took a round through the thigh and went down screaming. Basselone reached the bunker aperture, shoved his shotgun inside, and pulled the trigger twice. The screaming inside stopped. When he turned around, Kowalski was dragging himself forward, face white, leaving a red trail in the dirt. "Keep up, kid," Basselone growled, voice thick. "We ain't done." But his eyes wouldn't meet the boys. In the Japanese command cave beneath Shuri Castle, General Ushijima listened to the reports in silence. His chief of staff laid photographs on the map table, blurry reconnaissance shots of Americans walking upright under fire, arrows drawn to the strange rectangular bulges beneath their jackets. "Body armor," the intelligence officer said. "American secret weapon. Our bullets cannot penetrate." Ushijima studied the photographs for a long time. "Then we will shoot them somewhere else," he said finally. "Head, arms, legs, groin. The rifle is still a rifle." But his voice lacked conviction, and every man in the cave heard it. By late afternoon, the transformation was visible from the air. Marine patrols moved in loose, confident clumps where yesterday they had crawled. Japanese positions that had held for weeks began to waver, not from lack of courage, but from a creeping, corrosive doubt. Men who had once waited calmly for the perfect heart shot now fired wildly the moment a helmet appeared, spraying bullets like men trying to ward off hornets. Lieutenant Colonel Crouch watched it happen from a shell crater, field glasses to his eyes. A Japanese soldier stood up in a trench 200 yards away, fired an entire clip as fast as he could work the bolt, then simply dropped the rifle and stared, hands hanging empty at his sides. Crouch lowered the binoculars. "They're starting to believe it," he said to no one in particular. "That's the dangerous part. Because belief is contagious. And once men believe they cannot be killed by rifles, they start to do things no doctrine ever trained them for. They start to walk through fire without looking back. And the men beside them, who still bleed the old way, have to decide whether to follow. They weren't just witnessing survival, they were witnessing transformation. May 14th. The rain returned, hard and warm, turning the coral dust into a pale paste that sucked at boots and clung to rifle barrels. 3 days since the first walk across open ground, and the Japanese had learned. They learned fast when survival demanded it. At EU 430, a Japanese sniper named Sergeant Ogawa, formerly of the 22nd Independent Sniper Battalion, lay motionless on a limestone ledge above Sugarloaf Hill, cheek welded to the stock of a Type 97 6.5mm rifle fitted with a 4x telescope. He had spent the night crawling into position with a sack of rice for a rest and a bottle of urine to keep from moving. Ogawa had killed 29 Americans in 4 wars, China, Malaya, Guadalcanal. Now this. He did not believe in ghosts. He believed in wind, drop, and the fragile architecture of the human skull. He waited for the new pattern. The armored Americans no longer bunched. They advanced in staggered pairs, one man high, one low, using the low man as moving cover. They moved faster than before, almost arrogant. Ogawa waited until a tall Marine sergeant stood fully upright to wave his squad across a firebreak. The range was 320 meters. Ogawa adjusted for the rain, exhaled half a breath, and took the headshot. The Marine's helmet snapped sideways in a pink mist. The body dropped straight down, knees folding like a broken marionette. 1. The word spread along the Japanese line faster than signal flares. Atama. Atama, o ute. Shoot the head. By dawn the shift was complete. Rifles that had once sought center mass now hunted faces. Machine gunners traversed lower, hosing legs from the knee down. Grenadiers tried to drop knee mortars short, hoping to cripple, rather than kill outright. The battlefield filled with the new sound of men screaming from shattered femurs and blown-off jaws. The Marines adapted in turn. Gunnery Sergeant Basselone issued the order without consulting anyone higher. Chin straps tight, helmets low, eyes barely over the brow. Move like you're sneaking past your mother with a girl in the back seat. They began to crouch walk, heads tucked, plates angled forward like shields in some ancient phalanx. It looked ridiculous. It saved lives. Private Leki learned to advance staring at his own boots, trusting the man behind him to tap his shoulder when it was safe to rise. The first time a 7.7mm round struck his helmet rim and peeled a bright furrow across the steel, he vomited inside his mouth and kept moving. The second time, he only flinched. In a forward aid station cut into the side of a tomb, Dr. Clarence Smith worked by lantern light, sawing through a Marine's thigh bone while the man babbled about baseball scores. "They're shooting low now," Smith told the orderly holding the lantern. "Femoral artery city. Tell Crouch we're trading cracked ribs for exsanguination. 6 minutes from hit to black if we don't get a tourniquet on." The message reached Crouch at dusk, delivered by a runner with half his face shot away and still talking through the hole. Crouch read it, folded it once, and tucked it into his breast pocket, directly over his own Doron plate. That night, the Japanese tried something older than rifles. At 0200, 3 companies of the 32nd Independent Mixed Brigade slipped out of their caves under cover of rain, bayonets fixed, moving on padded feet. Their orders were simple. Close the distance, where headshots were impossible, and armor meant nothing against cold steel. They hit the lines of 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines like a silent wave. For 90 minutes, the night was nothing but grunts, muffled screams, and the wet thunk of bayonets finding meat. The Doron plates stopped lunges to the chest. Steel scraped across fiberglass with a sound like knives on dinner plates. But arms, throats, groins, and faces were still soft. Men died wrestling in the mud, one with his teeth sunk in an enemy's ear, another hugging a Japanese soldier tight so the bayonet could not be withdrawn for a second thrust. When dawn came, the Japanese were gone, melted back into their caves, leaving behind 180 dead and the knowledge that even ghosts could be bled. Lieutenant Colonel Crouch walked the ground at first light. He found Leki sitting against a shattered coconut log, helmet dented in 3 new places, eyes wide and fixed on nothing. "You good, son?" Leki's voice came out flat. "I killed a man with a rock, sir. He kept stabbing the plate. I ran out of bullets, so I used a rock." Crouch crouched, rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. The plate beneath Leki's torn dungaree was spiderwebbed with white scars. "That rock saved the Marine next to you. Remember that." But Leki only stared at the blood drying black under his fingernails. Far behind the lines, in a cave lit by a single captured American flashlight, Corporal Yamada Hiroshi listened to the sniper Ogawa describe the headshot that had worked. Ogawa spoke calmly, the way a carpenter describes a difficult joint finally cut true. The others listened in silence. Then someone asked the question no one had dared ask before. If the rifles no longer kill them in the body and we cannot always hit the head, and bayonets cost too much, what is left? Ogawa had no answer. He only cleaned his rifle with the same slow care he had shown for 4 years, but now the rag came away trembling. High on the Shuri Ridge, General Ushijima received the night's casualty reports. His operations officer placed a single sheet on the map table. 183 dead, 41 wounded. Enemy advanced 180 meters. Ushijima stared at the numbers until the paper blurred. "Bring up the 75mm mountain guns," he said at last. "If rifles no longer serve, we will use artillery at point-blank range. Steel that even their armor cannot turn." The guns began moving forward under cover of darkness. 12 of them, dragged by hand through mud and corpses, muzzles pointed at the thin green line of men who refused to die the way soldiers were supposed to die. For the Japanese, the rifle was no longer a weapon. It was a question with no answer. May 19th. The monsoon arrived early, a solid sheet of water that turned every draw into a creek and every foxhole into a grave. Visibility dropped to 50 yards, sometimes 20. Sound became everything. The slap of rain on helmets, the sucking of boots in mud, the distant thud of artillery feeling its way forward. The Doron plates were no longer enough. Everyone knew it now. Only 312 plates had reached the 1st Marine Division, barely one for every 10 riflemen. The rest carried the old promise: take cover, keep your head down, pray. The division tried to rotate them forward, but the math was merciless. A company that attacked with 40 armored men today would have 12 tomorrow, because the plates did not stop shell fragments, did not stop a 75mm round landing 3 feet away, did not stop the slow grind of exhaustion and infection. Lieutenant Colonel William Crouch stood in a sugarcane shed that served as battalion CP, rain drumming on the tin roof like machine gun fire. A single kerosene lantern lit the faces around the map. Captains with red-rimmed eyes, runners dripping on the dirt floor, Dr. Clarence Smith holding a mug he hadn't tasted in an hour. Crouch laid the last priority message on the table. Division says no more plates until June at the earliest. Factory in Ohio can't keep up. We fight with what we have. Silence. Then Captain Olander, 2nd Battalion's acting CO, spoke the words no one else would. "Sir, my men are starting to hate the ones who wear them." Crouch met his eyes. "Explain." "Yesterday, a company attacked Hill 57. 38 plates in the assault platoon. They walked the last 100 yards upright. The rest of us crawled. We took 21 dead, all unarmored. When we got to the top, one of my sergeants refused to shake hands with a kid who had 4 dents in his plate and a grin on his face. Said it felt like congratulating luck for murder." Smith set the mug down hard enough to slosh coffee over the rim. "I've got boys dying of gut wounds because they gave their plate to a bar gunner who already had one. I've got boys refusing plates because their buddy doesn't have one. We're tearing ourselves apart faster than the Japanese ever could." Crouch felt the old Peleliu ache behind his eyes. He had promised himself after that abattoir that he would never again ask men to die for inches. Now inches were being bought with guilt. "From this moment," he said quietly, "plates stay with the man they're issued to. No more trading. No more, you need it more than me. A man keeps his plate or he doesn't. Clear?" Olander started to protest, then saw Crouch's face and closed his mouth. Outside, the rain kept falling. That afternoon, the Japanese opened the new doctrine. 12 75mm mountain guns had been manhandled into caves and tombs along the forward slope, muzzles barely 20 meters above the valley floor. At 1400, they fired the first point-blank salvo. Airbursts set for 3 meters above ground, designed to shred anything soft that moved. The valley erupted in black fountains. Shrapnel whined like hornets. Men who had walked through rifle fire now died in pieces too small to recognize. Doron plates turned into coffins, fiberglass shards driven into chests by the force of near misses. Private Leki was crossing a shallow re-entrant with a reel of telephone wire when the first shell landed 10 feet away. The concussion lifted him, spun him, slammed him into the mud. He came up coughing blood, plate cracked in a diagonal fracture, one shoulder strap torn free. A corporal beside him had no face left. Leki crawled to the body, pried the dead man's plate loose with shaking fingers, and hung it over his own like a sandwich board. 2 plates now, front and back, 16 pounds of borrowed life. He staggered forward because falling down felt permanent. By nightfall, the Marines had learned a new way to advance. Not walking upright, not crawling, but something in between. Half-crouched, plates angled toward the caves, moving in short rushes between shell bursts like men threading a deadly loom. Gunnery Sergeant Basselone led one such rush, roaring at his squad to keep moving, keep moving. A shell landed directly behind him. The overpressure punched the air from his lungs. Shrapnel tore his calf open to the bone. He went down hard, plate smoking where a white-hot fragment had fused to the fiberglass. 2 unarmored Marines dragged him into a crater. One of them, Kowalski, the boy who had taken the thigh wound days earlier, now wore Basselone's spare plate because Basselone had forced it on him that morning. "You fucking idiot," Basselone rasped, blood bubbling on his lips. "I told you to keep it." Kowalski's eyes were ancient. "You're hit bad, Gunny. I'm not." Basselone tried to laugh and coughed red instead. In the battalion aid station, Dr. Smith worked by the light of a hissing Coleman lantern, amputating what the artillery left. He paused long enough to scribble a note on a blood-spattered pad. Day 9 of armor deployment. Torso penetrations by small arms, 0. Deaths by artillery fragmentation, 47. Morale, fracturing. He underlined the last word twice. At ZO 300, Crouch made the hardest decision of the campaign. He radioed division and requested permission to pull all Doron-equipped troops off the line for 48 hours, reorganize, redistribute, let the unarmored breathe. The answer came back in 4 words. Negative. Continue the attack. Crouch stood in the doorway of the shed, rain blowing sideways, and watched green tracers arc across the valley like malevolent fireflies. Somewhere out there, men were deciding who deserved to live based on 8 pounds of fiberglass and resin. He thought of the dead on Peleliu who had never been given a choice. Then he took his own plate off, laid it on the map table, and walked back into the rain without it. In a war built on unity, survival had become uneven. June 22, 1945. The last Japanese flag came down over the ruins of Shuri Castle at 10:15. Organized resistance ended 2 days later when General Ushijima and his chief of staff performed seppuku in a cave above Mabuni. Okinawa was declared secured, though snipers and holdouts would kill Marines for weeks yet. The island smelled of wet ash and opened graves. In a captured Japanese hospital tunnel, Dr. Clarence Smith sat on an ammunition crate surrounded by stacks of Doron plates, some scarred like moonscapes, others still factory green, all tagged with the names of men who would never wear them again. He was writing the final medical summary for the 1st Marine Division. The numbers were brutal in their clarity. From 11th of May to 22nd of June, 1,912 Marines hit by rifle or machine gun fire to the torso. 312 wore Doron plates. Of those 312, 4 killed by torso penetration, all 4 plates cracked by multiple close-range hits or armor-piercing rounds. Expected deaths without armor, 198. Actual deaths, 4. Reduction in lethal torso wounds, 98% in the armored cohort. Overall division KA, still 2,938, most killed by artillery, mines, grenades, headshots, or because they had no plate at all. Smith closed the folder. Then he opened a second, thinner folder marked Psychological Observations. It contained statements no official history would ever print. Men began to believe the plate was the only thing keeping them alive, and when it was taken away, they froze like children. Unarmored Marines refused to advance beside armored ones, called them tin men and dead men walking on borrowed time. 2 fistfights over possession of a single plate, 1 shooting. Japanese prisoners universally described the same nightmare, shooting Americans who stood up again and kept coming. He closed that folder too. Farther south, in a tent that had once been a Japanese officer's mess, Lieutenant Colonel William Crouch stood before a board of inquiry. He still wore the same dungarees, now sun-bleached and patched. His chest was bare of any plate. A Navy psychiatrist asked the question everyone wanted answered. Colonel, did the unequal distribution of the Doron vest constitute a moral injury to your command? Crouch considered the phrase, moral injury, the way a man considers a new wound. Yes, sir, he said, every day. Did it impair combat effectiveness? It impaired humanity. Effectiveness, that's above my pay grade. The board wrote something down and moved on. In the same week, Allied translators processed 412 Japanese prisoners taken after 15 May. 291 mentioned the Iron Men, or bulletproof Americans, unprompted. Corporal Yamada Hiroshi, captured when his cave was sealed with dynamite, was asked by a Nisei interrogator why he had fired all his ammunition into a single Marine who simply walked away. Yamada stared at the floor for a long time. Because if I stopped shooting, he said, I had to admit the rifle had betrayed me. My father carried that rifle at Port Arthur. My grandfather carried its grandfather at the siege of Pyongyang. 3 generations of Yamada men believed in it, and one morning on Okinawa, it became scrap iron. He looked up then, eyes red. You did not defeat us with tanks or ships. You defeated us with vests. The interrogator wrote the words down exactly. Years later, when the classified reports were declassified, historians would argue over the exact contribution of the Doron plate. Some called it marginal. Artillery still killed far more than rifles ever did. Others pointed to the collapse of the Shuri line in late May and said the psychological shock was decisive. The Marines who were there never argued. They simply remembered different things. Gunnery Sergeant Basselone, retired in Oceanside, California, kept one cracked plate on his garage wall. He never spoke of it to his children, only touched it sometimes when he thought no one was looking. Private First Class Robert Leki, college, marriage, 3 daughters, woke up for decades whenever a car backfired, tasting coral dust and cordite. He never wore a bulletproof vest again, even when his security guard job required it. Said the weight felt wrong. Lieutenant Colonel William Crouch ended the war with a Navy Cross and a bottle he could never quite finish. He died in 1968, quietly, and asked that no plate be buried with him. The Doron vest itself disappeared almost as fast as it had arrived. By Korea, the military wanted something lighter, something that stopped fragments too. M1952 armor would owe its existence to those ugly fiberglass dinner plates, but few remembered the debt. Yet something born on Okinawa never died. The knowledge that infantry could be engineered to shrug off the rifle, the basic weapon of war for 400 years. After 1945, no army on earth would ever again trust flesh alone. The last man who truly understood what had happened was probably General Ushijima in the moments before the Kaishakunin's blade fell. In his final dispatch, smuggled out by a staff officer who later surrendered, he wrote a single line that Tokyo never released. The Americans have removed the fear of the bullet. Everything else follows. Fear didn't disappear on Okinawa. It changed direction. It moved house from the attackers to the defenders, from the men advancing to the men pulling triggers that no longer commanded life and death. Armor didn't just protect bodies, it transformed battlefields. At Okinawa, panic rewrote doctrine, and bullets lost their power. On Okinawa, bullets learned fear before men did. If you want more Untold 2 stories that changed history in silence, subscribe now.